"Hello, Mrs. How," David said, holding out his hand to Catalina. "Catalina, please." "A family shouldn't stand on formalities," Catalina said. I noted how David was taken aback when Catalina hugged him. "Why don't you show them to their room, and I'll get the omelette started?" "I hope you two are hungry because you won't be after breakfast," I said, leading the two of them to our guest bedroom, with Alandra running in front of me. "What are you doing, you little goof?" I asked in a teasing light as Alandra danced in front of the room. "Nothing," Alandra replied with her trademark toothy smile. "When you're done unpacking, there's coffee in the kitchen if you two want any," I said, standing in the doorway with Alandra beside me, holding my hand. "We will." "We skipped breakfast to make our flight on time," Amber said, laying her suitcase on the bed. "Good, because Catalina likes cooking large meals, it reminds her of her childhood." "We'll let you two get settled." "Come on, honey, let's give them some privacy," I said, lightly patting Alandra's hand. "See, Poppy?" Alandra replied as she gazed up at me. "He seems nice," Catalina said offhandedly as I walked into the kitchen, while Alandra went to watch her My Little Pony show. "He does." "A rather polite fellow," I answered as I got mugs for all of us. "It smells heavenly in here," Amber said from behind us. I would have thought she would have unpacked. "Couldn't wait for that coffee, don't want to pass out before breakfast," she said, as if she read my mind. "Thank you," Catalina said, taking pride in her skill as a chef. I saw her eyes light up as I set the fresh cup before her. "Creamer is in the fridge, or there's milk, and here's the sugar," I stated, pushing the small dish that Catalina places it in for guests in case they do partake of a good cup of Java. "Thanks, Dad, this is just what the doctor ordered," Amber sighed as she inhaled the scent of the coffee. I noted how she mouthed a thank you to Catalina, who nodded in return when she set the creamer down before my daughter, who wasted no time in getting her coffee just the way she liked it. "So good," Amber moaned into her cup. "Thank you, my cousin owns a coffee farm in the highlands of Mexico. He sends us a couple of bags a month, knowing how your father really loves his coffee, as do I." "But my cousin really likes your father," Catalina said, shooting me this knowing smirk. "It wasn't that the man liked me, okay, he did, but that's only because I saved his business from going under when a disease wiped out his crop 2 years ago." "Hey, I wasn't complaining, I'm a silent owner of a coffee farm, and I get free coffee, so I say that's a win-win in my book." "He does?" Amber shot me a glance. "Oh yes, your father is a very kind man," Catalina said, buttering me up, shooting me this coy smirk as she rolled the omelette up after lining the middle with the caramelized onions, the roasted peppers, she took out the seeds to cut the heat down, and the roasted tomatoes before plating it. I couldn't help but watch her making a much smaller one for Alandra because we both knew Alandra wouldn't eat all of it if she was given a full-sized one. My gaze was drawn to Catalina as she stooped down to take the casseroles from the oven, causing her pajama bottoms to tighten over her bum. What can I say? I adore ogling my wife's body, I guess that's why she does things like that. My eyes flicked up as David ambled down the hall. I think he took over unpacking so Amber might chat with us under the guise of coffee now, so make yourself helpful and bring them to the table. Catalina said in a sarcastic tone, holding out 2 plates to me. Alandra, come to the table, I said in a fatherly tone, seeing my daughter glued to the television. See Poppy, Alandra mumbled, jumping from the couch and racing over to the seat she always sat in. Grouse Poppy's, smiling up at me with her gorgeous smile of hers as I put her chocolate milk before her. You're welcome, honey, I whispered into her hair and kissed the top of her head. I noted how Alandra nodded vehemently when Amber asked if she could sit beside her. Oh, this is so good, Amber moaned from behind her cued hand. I hope it isn't too hot for you, your father doesn't like a lot of heat, Catalina said in a motherly voice as she gazed across the table at my eldest daughter. No, shaking her head adds a little kick to it, Amber said in a polite manner. I wouldn't mind a little, thank you, David said with a smile when Catalina held out the bottle of Yucco Black Label Reserve Chili Habanero hot sauce she ordered from Mexico to him. It's hot, so use sparingly. I was raised on it, so I'm used to it, David said, taking the bottle from her. I watched how David did a taste test of it on a little bite of his omelette. You okay? Catalina asked, rubbing David's back as I watched the heat getting to him. Never better. What is this called again? I thought. He was mad as he added more Luco Black Label Reserve Chili Habanero hot sauce to his omelette. Catalina said matter-of-factly, I order it from Mexico. It's not the hottest sauce out there, but it is hot. Do you like it? Oh yeah, better than Tabasco sauce, David said with a nod. Good, then you'll love our family get-together. They all bring their own with them, Catalina said with a rather happy smile on her lips. We're going to Asheville tomorrow to the zoo. Would the two of you like to join? I asked, seeing Alandra getting excited in her seat at the thought. Only if we won't be an inconvenience to you three, Amber replied, looking around the table at us, dabbing her lips. You aren't an inconvenience to us, you're family, so never think that, Catalina said in that motherly voice of hers. Like I said, she does come from a large family, and I knew she was never comfortable with just the three of us in the house. Don't get me wrong, she loved us dearly, yet I knew she wanted more. All week, I could see how excited she was to have a full house. So, how did the two of you meet? Catalina asked, slipping her legs beneath her as she sat in her chair on our balcony while sipping her morning coffee. David here was already working at the store when I got hired to work in the pharmacy as the assistant manager, Amber said, sitting across from us at the small round table we placed out there for such times while Alandra enjoyed her cartoons. Worked your way up the ladder, huh? I stated, to which David nodded. I can respect that of a man. What are your plans going forward? I think that in a few years, after I get some more experience under my belt, I'll try for a more corporate job at the company, David said, with me nodding along approvingly of his plan. Do they have a program to help you train for such a position? Catalina asked, slipping her hand into my lap and squeezing my thigh. They do, but I want to make sure they won't turn me down, hence why I'm going to wait a few more years, David said before taking a sip of his coffee. Sounds reasonable, I nodded, knowing if he was a manager in my bank region, I too would be looking for someone with a little bit more experience managing a branch before thinking of adding them to the corporate ladder. So tell me, how did the two of you meet? Amber asked, her eyes darting between Catalina and me. We looked at each other, our eyes asking each other that silent question on who would tell that story. In the end, I thought Catalina telling it would be a bit funnier than if I told it. Well, we have to go back to when your father first arrived here. At the time, I was engaged to someone else, but he wasn't faithful. I sought David's nod in understanding as Catalina's hand never left my thigh. Yet, I always saw your father walking around the building with this face that sort of looked like someone shoved a pine cone up his cooester, Catalina said, getting a giggle out of Amber and a light chuckle from David. I mean, he is a handsome man, yet I was engaged, and I don't stray. I noted how Amber dropped her head at that. So anyway, as time went on, that face never left him for the 2 years he was here. So when I walked into his office that day, I had been single for a few months. I told your father to pull whatever was up his bum out of it, and who knew the man could laugh, she teased me, which I deserved. I was an a-hole during those years. Then we built a friendship. I know he wanted more, but he was patient with me. Then after 3 months, we had our first date, and it went from there, and I never looked back, Catalina said with love-filled eyes as she looked at me. So, I thought if you two aren't too tired, we'd explore the city for the day to get you two used to the lay of the land. Then we'll come back, and I'll cook us a nice big dinner, Catalina said. I heard the eagerness in her voice to make the both of them feel welcome. Oh, you've never been to the beach, I said, noting how my daughter's eyes widened. Seeing how we have this week off, how about we head down to Roberto's place if he'll let us use it for a few days? I spoke, looking over at my wife, knowing the place was large enough to hold the lot of us. You sure, honey? They're here, and it's easier to go to the beach here than it is in Kansas City, I stated factually. You know I'm fine with it. I know Alandra will be ecstatic to go, but you'll have to talk to Roberto, Catalina said, looking at me. I know, I nodded, seeing how it was my idea. Roberto was the type of man that respected you more if the one who thought of the idea was the one to ask. That's what I picked up from the man over the years of knowing him. I'll go make the call, I said, rising from my seat. The sounds of the city below us faded to nothing as I slid the glass sliding door closed. Are you enjoying your show, Munchkin? I asked, seeing Alandra's attention squarely on the TV like it always was on a Saturday morning. Walking out of Catalina's and my bedroom with my phone after it had charged, my thumb scrolled up the screen as the names of people who I've met and grown close to since coming to live in Charlotte flew past. As I neared Roberto's contact info, Roberto's thick accented voice came over the line. "Good morning, Roberto," I greeted. He didn't mind if I spoke English instead of Spanish since he knew I could do both. "I was wondering if you could do me a favor." The left corner of my lip lifted when he switched to English. All of Catalina's family could speak English, they only pretended they didn't know when someone was making a bum out of themselves in front of their family. I watched it a few times when some passing salesman tried to pawn off his wares while not outright insulting their intelligence, but you knew what the man was doing. It was always hilarious when the ladies joined in, then the teenagers would, only to watch as the person would scurry back to their car. "Yeah, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind if Catalina and I used your place at Canadian Hole," I said, seeing my daughter instantly whipping around in her seat, knowing what that meant. I tried to PR. I couldn't see that glee on her face when I said that. "Of course, you can, amigo. What's the special occasion?" He had a reason to ask, given we normally went to the mountains for vacations. A lot cheaper on the wallet and fewer people around. We usually only went to the beach when the whole family went. A Canadian Hole. My eldest daughter flew in with her fiancé, and she's never seen the ocean, I said truthfully. The whole family knew about how we were estranged, but understood why I walked out like I did. "See," I answered when he asked if I was bringing them over next weekend. I heard my sister-in-law's voice in the background asking what had him so excited. That was when I heard that excited voice of hers I knew well when he told her. Then I heard her speaking rapidly in Spanish before her voice faded away, knowing that in less than 10 minutes, the whole family would know. "Do you want me to bring the keys over?" "Nah, we'll pick them up when we show them around the city, say around 1, I spoke, still ignoring my daughter's antics on the couch as she bounced on it. "Ciro has a game today, but I'll leave them." I nodded along as he told me of the secret hiding spot he usually kept a spare house key in. "You tell Ciro I'll be rooting for him." "I expect 5 home runs," I heard my brother-in-law chuckle over the line. I knew Ciro could go pro, he was just that good, and I wished him all the luck in the world. "I will. I hope she enjoys the beach, as do I said before we ended the call. "Poppy, are we going to the beach?" Alandra asked with bated breath. "We are," I said, pocketing my phone, smiling at my daughter's antics as she bounced on her knees. "When I was thinking we go on Monday and enjoy the beach till Thursday, is that okay with you, princess?" I couldn't keep my smile from touching my lips at Alandra's vehement nod. "Now behave while you continue to enjoy your show," I said before stepping back out onto the balcony, feeling Catalina's hand on my back as I sank back down into my seat. Hours later found us cruising through the streets of Charlotte. Alandra sat between David and Amber on the back seat as she pointed out places she loved to go to, namely the Discovery Place. It was a little expensive but worth it. It was a very informative place, especially for a 4-year-old's mind. When lunch rolled around, we stopped at a popular downtown sit-down restaurant where I watched as my 2 daughters just chatted away. I noted how my wife had this rather happy, content look on her face as she watched my 2 children from across the table. David and I had a pleasant conversation about his 401k. While I wasn't a stock trader, I did know my way around them, so I gave him some tips about who and what I put my money into with my own 401k. I noted how he was listening intently to every word. It told me he was planning ahead, and I hoped the 2 of them didn't go the way the witch and I did. I have to admit, David was a pleasant man, just don't tell him I said that. I do have to keep my father-in-law vibe going, yet I was happy that Amber found herself a man that appeared to be a genuinely good guy. After lunch, we headed over to Roberto's place. I could see David's and Amber's confused looks when we pulled up to their house in Darita. I told them to wait in the car before quickly hopping out of it and heading off towards the spot Roberto had told me he would leave his house keys for his place in Canadian Hole. It didn't take me long to find it, the keys jingled in my hand. A warmth spread through my heart when I read Roberto's and Catalina's sister's note they had left with them. I could speak Spanish, not read it, so they wrote in English. I was very touched by their words. Ever since I started dating Catalina, her sister did size me up and told me not to hurt her sister or I'd have to deal with her and Roberto. However, over the months of our whirlwind romance, I grew on her and my brother-in-law. They were the first ones to help out if Catalina got overwhelmed with caring for Alandra when she was first born. Not that I blame Catalina, having your first child is nerve-wracking. I know Catalina went to bed every so often with worry on her mind if she would be a good mother and whatnot. So, I called in the troops and took my wife out when those days happened to show her that she was indeed a very good mother. As night descended on Charlotte, my little family clustered in the living room to spend family time simply watching a movie. It doesn't really matter what you do as long as you do it together. It was already bedtime when I noted Amber and David nodding off. I couldn't blame them. They had been up since the wee hours of the morning to catch their flight. Catalina gave me this look that I interpreted as go to your dad thing. I can't deny I was watching that bum of hers as she carried AER to her room. Amber, I whispered, lightly shaking her dad. My mind flashed back to when she was just a little girl when she would mutter in that sleepy tone of hers, "Let's get you two to bed," I said, seeing her eyes peering at me through the slit of her lids. Sorry, I did. I waved David off when he roused in his seat. It happens, don't worry about it, I said lightly. The moment Amber got to her feet, her arms slid around me. I've missed this for 7 years, Amber whispered into my chest. Good night, Dad, she said before placing a kiss on my left cheek and slipping her arm around David's waist. I was laying in bed, waiting for Catalina to come sauntering in, which she did after 15 minutes had passed, which was quick for Alandra. It told me Alandra was worn out. I felt myself hardening when I saw that sultry smile on my wife's lips as she walked along the bedside towards our bathroom, those eyes of hers noting the movement of the sheets which only intensified that sultry smile of hers. How that soft body of hers felt so divine beside mine. Once she had slid beneath the sheets, I bit my lip. My amour, shouldn't be going to bed with a hard-on, Catalina, I said to her in that sinful tone of hers. We had sex, and I slept like a baby after that, wouldn't you? Yet all too soon, strange how that is, 5 o'clock came around, and our alarm went off, which meant I had to get Alandra up so we could be on the road for the 3-hour drive to Asheville. Catalina was like a paparazzi with the number of pictures she took that day of me with Alandra, Alandra with her sister, Amber with David, and so on. I was pleasantly pleased Amber and Catalina got along as they talked about their wedding plans and venues. David was very attentive to Alandra, always heading off with her when Alandra wanted to show him something she really liked. As always, I was the watchful dad, as was David, which I appreciated. You never know these days, and there are some sick people in the world. We had lunch there at the zoo, then we wandered the ground some more before we were all worn out and had very sore legs by the end of it. I was carrying Alandra on my shoulders, not that I minded. I knew soon, far too soon, she wouldn't need me as much. As sad as that was, that is life, nothing stays the same forever. Halfway home, I noticed how Alandra was napping in Amber's lap. I noted how Amber shot me this smile in the review mirror. Honey, would you mind if we order in tonight? Catalina asked in a tired voice. No, you two up for pizza? I inquired, looking over at Amber and David. I don't mind 2 slices, David spoke, peering over at Amber, who shook her head. Supreme okay with you all? I queried, knowing Alandra wouldn't eat anything else. Catalina liked it as well. I don't, but I normally got overruled on the subject. No, David is allergic to olives, Amber said, laying her right hand on David's chest. Then how about this, a small supreme for them and a small meat lovers for us guys, I uttered with a smile. I can go with that, David nodded along, earning us both an eye roll from Catalina. You get the pizzas ordered, I'll get ours packed for tomorrow, Catalina said, flashing me that dazzling smile of hers as she and Alandra walked hand in hand to her bedroom. Dad, you know we do. You know what would happen to me if I reneged on the beach? I asked with a pointed look once I had placed our order. Are you trying to get your father killed? I joked, but Alandra would put up a fit for weeks about it. I just don't want you all to go to too much trouble for us. It's fine, Amber. Plus, I did tell you I would take you to it a long time ago when you were little, and I like to keep my word, I said, seeing that Amber too remembered that conversation as I did when she was 10. So, Tony, when were you planning on heading out? David asked, following me into the living room. Say 7 in the morning. It's a 6-hour drive to Roberto's place at Canadian Hole. Yes, that is the name of the beach, I stated, seeing their disbelieving looks. We'll stay till Thursday so you two can enjoy yourselves there. It's really a lovely place. Honey, what time is it? Catalina called out to me from Alandra's room. 7:20, I hollered back. Something going on? Amber asked, confused. A football game is on, I said, which was true. A game did start soon. I saw David racking his brain trying to determine if there was a football game on, given it was late spring. Soccer, I clarified, seeing how David wanted to smack his forehead for not thinking that. I didn't know you liked soccer, Amber said, pulling her legs beneath her as she snuggled against David on the love seat. I could take it or leave it. Catalina and Alandra love the games, I just grew accustomed to them, I said offhandedly. Her family are big fans of the sport. They have this big party when the World Cup is being played, which I attend, as they hold one for the Super Bowl for me when it's on because that's what family does, compromise with one another. I know we're about to sit down to it. My eyes flickered over to Catalina when she and Alandra walked in talking on her phone before switching to Spanish, which I knew she only did if it was private, smiling as Aura raced into the living room and climbed onto the sofa, getting into her spot, waiting for the game to start, turning the TV on and switching the channel to ESPN3 for the game between Mexico and Brazil. Don't tell Catalina this, but I was rooting for Brazil. She takes football, soccer, as seriously as Americans take football. I patted Catalina's leg when a knock came on our condo door, knowing it had to be the pizzas. Her attention was squarely focused on the game as Mexico was in the lead during the first half of the first period. Personally, I found soccer boring, as I know she thought the same about football. Still, being a good man and wife, we put that aside and just enjoyed the time we shared together, paying the teenage boy and giving him a very good tip before taking the pizzas from him. Pizzas here! I called out to them as I carried them into the kitchen and got enough plates out. Amber and David ambled into the kitchen, yet Alandra and Catalina were glued to their seats. I knew Alandra did so because she wanted to be like her mother. Make yourselves a plate, I gestured, carrying their plates to them. Thank you, honey. Can you get me a beer? Catalina asked, placing a kiss on my cheek. Sure, babe. Kool-Aid for you, though, I teased my daughter. Aren't they going to join us? Amber asked, low, after I sat down with my plate. Nah, not with Mexico in the lead, they won't move from that spot, I said before taking my bite. God, I missed Meat Lover's pizza. Oh, this is good, David said before inhaling his slice. I know, best pizza joint in town, I stated, savoring the meaty toppings, knowing it would be some time before I had another Meat Lover's pizza. See, Catalina shouted as she surged from her seat with her plate in one hand and her beer in the other, with Alandra mimicking her mother. No puedo creer que Ken la, she beamed as one of Brazil's forwards stole the ball before Mexico could score. Alandra, language, I chided when Alandra took her mimicry a little too far for a 4-year-old, casting my wife a glance. She looked away in embarrassment, knowing she let her mouth lead her mind a little too often when a game was on. With our stomachs full of good pizza and a few beers for us, I carted Alandra off to bed at her normal time. I was surprised to find that David was into the game by the end of it. Saying our good nights to one another, we parted for our own rooms. Catalina was up at 5:30 the next morning, making breakfast for us all. I knew she was excited at the prospect. I knew if Carson was here, she wouldn't know what to do. wrapping my arms around her and kissing her neck as she flipped the pancakes that were cooking on the flat skillet, feeling her lean back against me as we just enjoyed that moment of silence. Bet you thought I wasn't going to. You must be crazy to think I'd keep my hands to myself when I have my sexy wife in my arms, I retorted, seeing Catalina blushing madly. You better not, I heard her bashful whisper. Got to say, that did put a smile on my face. Why wouldn't it? After all, I have a gorgeous wife, a hyper daughter, and a grown one about to start her own adventure into married life. Life was good at that point. Wake up, Munchkin, pancakes are nearly ready, I said, rousing my daughter from her slumber. We don't want to miss the beach, do we? I whispered when Alandra rolled over to go back to sleep, biting my lip when that seemed to jolt her awake. Knocking on the guest bedroom door and opening it slightly, we're awake, just give us a few to get dressed, I heard David's voice through the gap. Okay, just checking. Breakfast should be done soon, I said before easing the door closed. Thanks, Dad, Amber said as I handed her and David their cup of morning Java. Honey, pull the orange juice out and set it on the table, Catalina directed as she placed the last of the flapjacks on the stack she had built, setting the juice in Alandra's morning cup of chocolate milk on the table. I went back to help set the table and aid my wife in carrying the food. I couldn't stop smiling as Amber was in the kitchen helping out Catalina like I was about to do with David, lending a hand. Don't just stand there gawking, Dad, get the plates, Amber teased as she carried the plate of flapjacks to the table, as David handled the 2 plates of sausage, one for breakfast sausage and one of a spicier blend. I caught my wife's content smile as she got the syrup from the cabinet. As I got the plates for us all, I watched as I walked back to the table at how Catalina moved around it, acting like Amber and David were her own kids, and I saw how Amber latched onto that. It made me wonder what truly happened to my children while in their mother's care. As much as I don't want to hear a damn thing about that woman, I think I'm going to have to bite that down to find out. The reason we were out of the condo by 6:45, with the dishes done, the car packed, we headed out to the sandy shores of Canadian Hole. Mama, my head peered over the trunk of my car as that word did not come from Alandra but from Amber. I saw Catalina was a little surprised too by it, but that surprise quickly turned to happiness that flooded her eyes. Would you show me around? I had no idea why Amber was all nervous for. Certainly, Catalina said, holding out her right arm to Amber. You boys don't mind unloading the car, do you? We can handle it, can't we? I asked, looking over at David, who nodded along. Come on, Alandra, let's show your sister the ocean, Catalina said in that sweet, caring voice of hers, with Alandra's cheerful okay filling the air. Did something happen between Amber and her mother? I caught myself from saying what I normally call that woman. I could see something brewing in his eyes as David thought on the matter. As we unloaded the bags, I think Amber should be the one to tell you, I noted. I saw how he looked down when I took hold of his left arm. Did that witch hurt my little girl? I asked in a firm tone. Emotional, nothing physical, at least that's what she told me, still does to this day. Not when I'm around, though. She knows I won't put up with it in my house. Kicked her bum out a few times when I heard it. I think you'll do, I said, releasing my hold on his arm. I won't say a word to Amber. With that, I showed him where he and Amber could stay on the other side of the house so they could have some privacy to do what engaged couples do without worrying about having Alandra over. Here with the bags stowed in their proper rooms, the two of us headed out to join the girls. I told you I'd get you here someday, didn't I? I spoke from behind them as Catalina and Amber just stood there looking out at the white-capped waves while Alandra ran along the beach looking for shells like she normally does. I was not expecting my daughter to throw her arms around me like she did. Thank you, it's so beautiful, her whisper was hot on my neck as I just held her and gently rubbed her back. You and I need to have a talk later, just us, I whispered low into her ear, feeling her nodding against my shoulder before slipping out of my arms and into David's. Have you ever been to the beach? I asked the man in my daughter's life. No, this is the first time for me as well. My folks were poor, not saying they didn't work, just poor. So something like this was always just a fantasy for us growing up, David said, yet his eyes weren't on me, no, they were out on that vast expanse of blue before us. I can understand that. When Amber was growing up, money was tight. I was like you, worked my way up while going to night school so my family could have a better life, I said, feeling Catalina slipping her hand into mine as she came to my side. Then Amber's hand took hold of my free one like she had done so many times as a child. Later that night, after putting Alandra to bed and Catalina keeping David entertained, I led Amber out onto the back deck of Roberto's beach home. I knew I would hate what I was about to hear. What parent likes to hear that their child was abused? Yet I had to do it. I had to know what she had done to my children. Okay, Amber, I know I told your brother I didn't want to hear about what happened after I left, but I think I need to hear it, I said as the sound of the waves breaking on the shore filled the air. You sure? Dropping her gaze, this wasn't like my daughter, not the daughter I knew. I placed my hand on her right arm, which brought up her gaze to me. Very sure, Amber. She saw the seriousness of my words as she looked into my eyes. By the end of her tale, I wanted to kill the witch, yet I couldn't. Not then. So I just hugged my daughter as tightly as I could as she cried into my chest. The 304 couldn't take responsibility for her own damn actions that destroyed our marriage, so she had to blame our kids. Children who she wrangled into her scheme to guilt me into staying with that 304. If that wasn't worse, she tried to get her to entertain one of her male friends she had on the side when she was married to that prick. I wondered why my parents didn't tell me this, unless they didn't know. I knew my old man would have gone ballistic and my mother would probably have beaten that 304 with a rolling pin. Oh baby, I'm so sorry, I whispered into her hair. I'm sorry about no, Dad, you were hurt, you had every right to think we didn't want you. I don't blame you. You're here now, that's what matters. I knew one thing, my children were not going to be dealing with that woman again, not if I had a damn thing to say about it. Is everything all right? Catalina huffed as Amber hugged her quite unexpectedly, her eyes glancing at me, knowing she could feel the same trembling as I could. I think Catalina knew something had happened with their mother for Amber to take such a liking to her, not that she ever voiced it to me, well, at least not at that point in time. Sure, it's going to be all right, Catalina said in that motherly voice of hers as she comforted Amber. Come, let's get you cleaned up and something to calm your nerves, she said, guiding Amber into the house and giving me that look that she wanted to know everything. I was beating an old 2x4 against a post to vent my anger out on, so I didn't take it out on anyone else, seeing how I couldn't wrap my hands around that witch's neck at the moment, so beating the hell out of that post would just have to do. I take it Amber told you? David's voice filled the air as my chest heaved from my excursion of beating the daylights out of that pole. Yeah, I said, tossing the plank into the sand. I want you to know I would never, ever treat Amber like that, David said, walking down the steps that led to the beach. You best not. I don't think my wife would enjoy visiting me in prison, I joked. Don't worry, noted, David said with a friendly smile. She isn't helping to pay for the wedding, is she? I asked, looking over at him when David joined my side. God no, she thinks us getting married is a mistake, she wants Amber to be single so she can use her to lure men in. I was really starting to like this man as he spat in anger. Good, if you need help, you contact us and we'll help out any way we can, I said firmly. You really mean that? David asked with this quizzical look on his face. I nodded. I know what a wedding costs, having been through it myself. I know venues and whatnot isn't cheap, and I know how it is starting out in life when you're just now laying the foundations of your adult life. So I know money might be tight for you and Amber planning this all out. If we can lend a hand, don't hesitate to call us, we'll set something up, I spoke in a fatherly voice as I turned to the man and held my hand out to him. I will, you have my word, Tony, David said with that firm handshake of his. Did your father teach you that handshake? I asked, seeing him nod. Good, a father should teach that to his son. What are the two of you doing out here? Catalina asked from the top of the steps. Oh, you know, guy things, I said, smiling up at her. I didn't need to see it, I knew there was an eye roll at that. Well, it's getting Late, you two should come in for the night, Catalina said, yet I knew from the way she stood she wanted to talk. Saying goodnight to David before he walked back up those steps, hearing him utter those same words to Catalina as he passed her, Catalina knew me well enough to know while I might not show it on the outside, I was royally pissed at my ex-wife. This anger isn't good for you. She's not under her mother's thumb anymore, Catalina said in a soft tone as she ran her hands up my chest. She told you too, this? Catalina only nodded. I can't blame you for leaving that woman, although I do wish you would have had brought the kids with you. Then I could be a mother of 3, Catalina teased. 3, but not 4, I mused, wiggling my eyebrows. I don't know, do you think you have it in you to knock me up again? Catalina asked in a challenging voice. Oh, you damn right I do, I stated firmly. Then I best stop taking my pills, Catalina said with a sultry smile. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of fun as we took Amber and David all over that island, ate some good seafood, and met some very nice people. Although I did have to hold Catalina back when this person, the same age as Amber, came up and called me racist and whatnot. I didn't take it seriously, who would? When some multicolored-haired, nose-pierced whack job comes up to you screaming, "You're stealing Ling's culture," I knew if the kid came looking for a job at my corporate office, she wouldn't make it through the door. Her appearance was not professional, and in my line of work, you have to appear professional, otherwise no one is going to trust you with their money. I don't think the woman saw the punch coming until it was too late and she was on her ass, staring confusedly at Catalina as she cursed in Spanish. I won't go into what she said, let's just say I learned far more curse words that day than I did on the days Alandra was at her grandparents' place. I was thankful that David had the wherewithal to cover Alandra's ears. Maybe next time you shouldn't accost people you don't know and get in their faces about you don't know, then you wouldn't be on your bony bum when you can't even understand what my wife said to you. Now I suggest a new dye job and a new outlook on life if you want to get anywhere in this world, I said before leading my family off. It kind of made me wonder what the fate of the world would be with people like that running around. I just hope I'm long dead by then. Even that little blip on our radar couldn't spoil our time there, but all too soon it was time to leave. After washing the sheets and placing them back in the closet, Roberto never wanted sheets on the beds if the house was going to sit and be used for a while. I knew it would since the family didn't come down here until 2 weeks before the start of the new school year, so the kids would have something fun to look back on when they start a new class with brand new people. Amber and David helped ensure the house was tidy like we had found it before I locked up the house, knowing we wouldn't be back in Charlotte until late that night. Thanks, Dad, the beach was just perfect, Amber said in a happy voice as she hugged me as we entered my condo. You're welcome, honey, I said, rubbing her back. It might have taken a while, but I do keep my word. I'm going to put Alandra to bed, Catalina whispered before placing a kiss on my right cheek and carrying our dozing daughter to her room. It wasn't long before Amber and David retired for the night as well, like I was about to do as I carried Catalina's and my bags into our bedroom. The monthly family get-together was a hoot. Amber and David were welcomed with open arms. Catalina's mother and father took a keen interest in Amber, not that it was surprising after all, Amber was their step-grandchild, and they were very family-oriented. I kept my ears open for anything that might have been said about the two of them. I know Catalina did the same. I even saw her lay into one of the teenagers when he said lewd things about my daughter. If I had heard it, it wouldn't have been just a tongue-lashing, the boy was 18. If he could say that, he could take the beating that followed, and the boy knew it too. Although I did have to jump in and save David before he burned his tongue to a cinder when he was about to eat chili, I knew it had ghost peppers in it. David might like the heat, but he wasn't that suicidal, which got a round of good-natured chuckles from the others before they handed him a bowl of chili with the heat he could handle. Like all good things, it came to an end far sooner than I would have liked. I hadn't talked to my boy all week due to him doing some type of training he couldn't tell me about. I did hope Carson was doing well and whatever the army had him doing. As we stood there in the airport saying our goodbyes, Amber held on to Catalina like she was really going to miss her stepmother. Then again, Catalina was probably the only motherly figure Amber had had other than her grandmother's in years. I watched how Alandra held back her tears as my 2 children hugged for just as long. You two have a safe flight, call us the moment you land, I said, bringing David into a one-arm hug, which I could tell surprised him. What can I say? The man grew on me. We will, David answered, with Amber nodding along. Don't forget what I told you, if you need help with the wedding, we're just a phone call away, I stated, with Catalina nodding along. Does that mean you'll walk me down the aisle? Amber asked, with hope in her eyes. Most definitely, wouldn't miss it, I said with a fatherly smile, which caused my daughter to crush me in a hug. And you can call anytime you need to talk. I'm always here to listen, Catalina said in a motherly, caring voice. I will, thank you, I heard Amber whisper as she hugged Catalina again. No need for thanks. I'm your stepmother. I want you to be comfortable talking with me about anything that's troubling you. And I know Alandra is going to want to talk to her big sister. I watched as Catalina rocked Amber like she did with Alandra when she knew Alandra was troubled by something, picking Alandra up so she could wave goodbye to her sister over the throng of bodies. I had to fight back my tears as my daughter's form disappeared within that group, yet I knew at least now we were talking again, making up for the lost time that I foolishly squandered in my sorrow, that there would be a next time and a next. There wouldn't be a damn thing anyone could do to stop me from seeing my daughter. The months passed, and the refounding of my and my children's relationship grew stronger as the days passed. Amber and I spoke almost every day. David even called to get advice on banking and whatnot, which I was glad to offer. Carson called as much as he could when he wasn't on duty or out training somewhere. I know the two of them talked to Catalina a lot, something I know thrilled her to death. I know the wedding planning was stressing Amber out, and I knew there were a few times Catalina had to calm her down. When summer was over, Alandra started her kindergarten class. I was both proud and saddened at the same time, knowing my little girl was growing up so fast. Catalina stayed on her birth control, stating she didn't want to be pregnant when it was time to fly out for their wedding, which I could understand. By then, I knew she and Amber had formed a very tight bond, something I know she didn't have with her mother. If I was truthful, it was a blessing, and I knew it irked the out of the witch. As Thanksgiving approached, I knew Carson couldn't fly back to Kansas City, which saddened me. Still, he promised to fly to Charlotte for Christmas. He wanted to save up enough leave time to attend Amber's wedding before he would be discharged that summer. Not to knock anyone in the service, I was damn happy to hear. I'm not demeaning anyone who takes that oath, I'd never do that, that would be dishonorable, and I like to think of myself as an honorable man. It's just some nights when Carson was off training on whatever it was, had me laying in my bed and worrying about my son's safety. I think a lot of service personnel can understand that because some of them have their own kids in whichever branch they join. Hey, Mom, I spoke into my phone as we walked through the airport to catch our flight to Kansas City to join my parents and David and Amber, along with his parents, for Thanksgiving. No, we haven't boarded yet. The flight doesn't leave for another 2 hours. I was calling you to let you know we're at the airport and should be on our way soon, handing Alandra my phone when she was so eager to talk to her grandmother. They try to get out as often as they can to see us, not that they would ever have to buy a plane ticket. I handled that, they just didn't travel a lot given their age. As we sat waiting for our flight, I noted how Alandra was texting like mad to Amber, telling Amber everything she needed to know with her vast experience as a 5-year-old. I noticed that Amber was playing right along. Then I heard the ding of the text that I set for Carson should he have free time to text us. It seemed my daughter was chatting away with the both of them and happy as a clam too. Rising from my seat and taking my phone from Alandra as our flight was ready to board, Mom, Dad, I noted how Catalina's cheeks got rosy when Amber called out to us, as she and David had come to drive us to my parents' home. I know she and Amber hugged for a very long time. I never interrupted when she and Amber would talk. I could tell from the look on Catalina's face that Amber needed a woman she could talk to who wasn't trying to manipulate her. I know Alandra loved the praise from David. After all, he was about to become her brother-in-law. David, I greeted, holding out my hand to him, which he took, then pulled me into that manly one-arm hug. "These all your bags?" he asked, to which I nodded in response. "The car is this way," Amber said, holding Alandra's hand, which she was happy to do, as Alandra hadn't seen her big sister for some time.